we've got a unified position in the Labour Party, but I think that for Labour voters, people who vote Labour and support Labour and kind of share the Labour Party's principles and values, it's really not much help to them to see Michael Gove slugging it out with David Cameron, because actually they're not interested, and their point of view is not what motivates them. And I think the problem has been is that there are Labour arguments for staying in that our voters haven't been able to hear us putting across. So
your voters
I think
said they don't even know. 45%, was it, of Labour voters said in a poll just at the end of last month they weren't sure of your party's position.
And that's not surprising, bearing in mind the airwaves have been absolutely dominated by the argument within the Tory party.
Do you think SNP supporters would say that, or Green supporters, or Lib Dems say, oh, we couldn't get our message across because of the Tories? I mean, presumably you would know your party's position if you were an actual supporter or a voter.
Well, if you look at the Loughborough University research, it shows that not only is it dominated by men, but it's dominated by Tory men. And that is the fact that the debate so far. And therefore what we need is more ability for women to hear specific arguments that certainly we want to put forward about why it's important to stay in, but also for people to hear Labour arguments, because we have got different arguments. For example, on the health service, you know, we think there are problems with the health service.
So why isn't that voice coming through? I mean, you can't just say the Tories are too loud. You know, people will turn around and say Labour has been non-existent.
No, we're not saying they're too loud. We're saying that the huge volcanic bust-up in the Tory party is not surprisingly grabbing the media attention. But if we want balance in this debate, in order to help people make up their minds so that they make the sort of decision that they really want to make, the balance needs to not just be between Leave and Remain, it needs to be also between men and women, and it needs to be between Labour and Tory, because our supporters are entitled to hear why we as Labour people are urging them to vote in. So, for example, on the health service point, which is a case in point, you see, Leave are saying you've got to leave if you care about the health service. We're saying, actually, we think the government are doing things completely wrong on the health service. So we don't agree with David Cameron on what he's doing on the health service, but we're saying blame the government, don't blame the EU. It's not their job to run the health service.
Heidi Alexander, I know, has been making that today. Yeah. It's a point that could have been made very clearly by Jeremy Corbyn if he'd wanted to share a platform with David Cameron. But you see, we have been making these points, but it's just been quite difficult to get them through. And actually, as far as platform sharing is concerned, when I was acting leader, I set up the Labour In campaign as a separate campaign because I felt that we needed to get our message across separately. But I've actually done some you don't think it was a missed opportunity? I mean, you know, for Jeremy Corbyn to stand side by side David Cameron and say, of course we're different political animals, but we're sharing a platform because this is bigger than party politics. Isn't that a missed opportunity?
No, because as leader of the Labour Party, he wants to put forward Labour's arguments. Now, I've done some appearing at things with David Cameron, not because I agree with his arguments, but because I want people to see that Labour is for in. But I think it's also important that we have separate arguments because we've got our own points of view. For example, on rights at work, we actually think that the EU guaranteeing maternity pay and holiday leave, that's important that the EU does that because we don't trust future Tory governments not to decide it's a great idea to repeal all of those.
I mean, Nick Watt just mentioned at the beginning, he's in Salford, he's in Greater Manchester because these are areas that basically have been safe Labour seats for yonks. Do you think a lot of these places have been ignored or have been slightly left off the chart? Because, you know, coming back to this figure, if nearly half your voters in a poll just 2 weeks ago literally don't know your party's position, that is catastrophic.
Well, it's for us to make sure that they do know what our position is and why. And they've not been ignored, but this is a different proposition. It's very different. Normally, it's vote for this person, for this party in this area. This is a very, very different proposition. But we've got Labour values and principles about why we want to stay in, and we need to get that across to our voters. And it's for all of us in the Labour Party to try and do that as best we can.